probably already picked up this morning that we are now firmly into the Advent season. Can anyone shout out, what does the word Advent mean? Anybody? What's that? Arrival. Yeah. So Advent means arrival. So of course, this month, throughout this 4-week season, we are reflecting on the arrival of King Jesus in human flesh as a baby boy. But in the biblical narrative, there are actually two Advents. We stand here at our point in the story, looking forward to a second arrival of King Jesus to restore all things to the way they should be, to reign in peace and harmony, to spread joy throughout his creation, and to reorder our entire existence around his loving presence. So over the remaining Sundays of Advent, we will be walking through the story of God through the lens of the three remaining themes of Advent, which are peace, joy, and love. And the simple question that we will be answering is, what does it mean to live between the two Advents? We'll do this by entering the story from the lens of a specific Advent theme each week, and this week we get to dwell on peace. Now, I'll set the stage by telling the story of creation, rebellion, and promise. But then I'll invite you to join in as storytellers when we get to the story of redemption and the church. And the simple ask is this: where is peace present in the movement of God and his people throughout the biblical story? Sound good? Awesome. Before we get started on that journey, would you pray with me? Father of Shalom, would you reveal yourself to us today through your story? Jesus, Prince of Peace, would you reign in our lives with your kingdom of harmony? Spirit of tranquility, would you be present in our hearts and minds in subtle and magnificent ways today? Amen. In the beginning, God brought peace out of chaos. What was once formless and void began to be filled with beauty and order. The God of the universe, Father, Son, and Spirit, wove together light and dark, sun and moon, land and sea, plants and animals into a tapestry of belonging. He took the dissonance of nothingness and orchestrated the most beautiful harmony. He stepped back from the canvas, looked at his creation, and he called it good, but not complete. You see, God was not just creating a piece of art to be admired, but a home to be lived in. And this home needed residents. So God brought wholeness to his creation by forming the first humans, Adam and Eve. Filled with the breath of life from God's Spirit, these humans lived in harmony with their Creator, with each other, with the creation, and with their very selves. They flourished with the abundance of life to the full, provided by a loving Father. They worked to cultivate the garden's beauty and discover the depths of God's creativity. God saw this reality and called it very good. A creation of order, harmony, flourishing, and wholeness. In other words, a creation of peace. What Adam and Eve couldn't realize at the time was just how rare their experience would seem through the eyes of history. Beaten and battered by a violent world, we sit here together today and hear the story of Adam and Eve and wonder, can a place like Eden ever exist again? Now we'll get to that. But first, it's important to reiterate that what we are searching for in the great treasure of God's peace. The peace of God's story is this: a world of order, harmony, flourishing, and wholeness. So back in the garden, Adam and Eve enjoyed this reality for a little while. They took walks through the forest alongside their Creator. They enjoyed the fullness of harmony with each other as the first married couple, enjoying a seemingly endless honeymoon. They discovered the fruitfulness of labor in God's creation, growing food and flower alongside rivers of abundance. They even contributed to God's order, naming animals and exercising authority over the creation. Now, no one knows exactly how long this went on, but you can imagine an ever-deepening sense of peace sinking into the bones of creation. a world with endless possibility and boundless harmony. Tragically, that peaceful order would become totally distorted much too soon. One day, Adam and Eve strayed from the life God had designed for them. An agent of chaos, the serpent, entered the garden and questioned the boundaries of God's created order. In tempting Eve with the forbidden fruit, the serpent sowed division and deceit into their relationships with each other, their God, creation, and themselves. Adam and Eve became distracted from the flourishing they enjoyed with God. They forgot the harmony and wholeness they experienced with each other. With 2 bites into the fruit, first by Eve and then by Adam, they broke the peaceful order of God's creation and inaugurated a new order, if you could really call it that. Really, it was a kind of endless disorder. When God showed up on the scene of the crime, the impacts of their decision became clear. He had come for their daily walk through the forest, but instead he found his people hidden in shame. Where there was once true peace between God and his creation, now there was division, disorder, and death. The consequences of their sin dismantled the peaceful order they once enjoyed. The sense of their lives changed from with to against. They would now work against the ground, toiling for survival. They would now live against each other, with one ruling over the other in selfishness and greed. They would now live against God, tempted to trust and worship other things. And they would even work against themselves, constantly choosing things that brought pain and harm into their own lives, rather than the flourishing of God's design. Now, this change from with to against brought with it a change from peace to chaos, from compassion to contempt, and from dwelling to division. At this, the first couple realized that the order, harmony, flourishing, and wholeness of God's peace would be far from them and their descendants forever. Humanity grew in number and in chaos, living for themselves rather than for others, and certainly not for God. It makes you wonder, would it be better for God's canvas to be painted over or thrown out, for the Creator to reset back to the formless and void of before and start over? Well, God had a different idea. In a deeply disordered world, God found one man who was faithful to his way of life, Abraham. God made a promise to this one man and his wife that he would father a nation that would become the people of God, agents of peace in a chaotic world. Through blessing this barren couple with a child, God would go on to bless the entire world with his peaceful order, harmony, flourishing, and wholeness. Now, there's an ancient word for this fourfold peace, and that's shalom. In the biblical narrative, this word appears for the very first time in this covenant conversation between Abraham and God. The shalom that God was offering to Abraham would one day be offered to the whole world through his offspring. God's design was for their own peace with one another to emanate outward to their neighbors, to set off a chain reaction of contagious shalom through one people, Israel, the light to the nations. Now, Israel's story is not a simple one or really a peaceful one either. They would become at times both the conqueror and the conquered. They journeyed from abundance into famine, into 400 years of slavery, then into the wilderness on their way to the land of promise. They expected to enjoy the shalom of God in this promised land forever, and at times they got a glimpse of it. But it really became a place of constant conflict and disharmony for generations. Eventually, as their kingdom broke down and followed Adam and Eve's trajectory from with to against, they were carried into exile. But throughout this winding journey, God's promise of peace persisted in their hearts. Their warrior king David once wrote poetry of God as a shepherd who leads us to lie down in green pastures by quiet waters, enjoying abundance in the presence of our enemies. Their prophets Isaiah and Jeremiah told of an age to come when weapons would be remade into gardening tools, of a peaceable kingdom where the wolf will live with the lamb, the leopard will lie down with the goat, the calf and the lion and the yearling together and a little child will lead them. This age would be undeniably marked by peace, which was good news to a people living in disharmony, disorder, and dissonance. When would this age of peace begin? Well, not for a while, it turns out. The story of Israel could be described as a constant spiraling away from the way that God designed life to be, eventually leading to God falling silent for 400 years. But then, the dawn of peace. In this heralding of a Savior who would soon arrive on the scene, angels of God announced to the shepherd, peace on earth, goodwill to humanity. The advent of God's shalom had begun. Now, friends, here's where you join me in as storytellers. In a story that we know well, we get to search our hearts and our minds with this question. Think of Jesus' life, death, and resurrection. Where do you see him restoring order, harmony, flourishing, and wholeness to God's creation? Now, I invite you to think about that just for a moment. And then I'd love for us to just go around the room, sharing moments, stories that come to mind. I'll pass the mic around for a few minutes. From Jesus' life, death, and resurrection, where do you see him enacting order, harmony, flourishing, and wholeness? Reflect on that for a moment, and then I'll pass the mic around. All right, what you got? Throw your hand up. I'll bring the microphone to you. A moment from Jesus' life, death, and resurrection that restores peace in God's creation. Yeah, what you got, Nick?
The story of the woman at the well comes to mind, of like someone who was just outcast and degraded by society, but Jesus saw her humanity and valued that.
So good. Thank you. Yeah, what else? Story of Jesus enacting peace. Got a hand in the back.
The demoniac who was definitely in chaos, and Jesus came and brought peace to him and the village.
Absolutely. Thank you. Oh, we got one more back.
The story of the man with a withered hand that he restored.
Yeah. There you go. I love it.
You can go anywhere else you want.
I love it. Okay, cool. Who else has got something? A story of Jesus enacting peace, order, harmony, flourishing, and wholeness. Yeah.
When Jesus calms the storms in the boat, so you see him bringing order into the chaos of the elements as well.
Yeah. Yeah, that's good. He said, peace, be still. Absolutely.
No longer needing to sacrifice animals.
There you go. I love it. Come on, here we go. We're getting started.
When he restored the ear of the centurion that Paul cut off.
Yeah. That's good.
I think of Matthew, the tax collector. He went from being part of the most reviled groups in Jewish culture to one of Jesus' 12 disciples.
Absolutely. That's good. Restoring harmony. Now think of, these are wonderful stories from Jesus' life, his healings, his teachings. Think of his death and resurrection. How did that accomplish these things? Order, harmony, flourishing, and wholeness. How did it restore those things to God's creation? Maybe one or two more. Oh, thanks. Sorry. It was just a really peaceful moment. I was just enjoying that.
In Jesus' ministry during his life, there's still a human limitation to his ability to distribute the peace of God. But in his death and resurrection, through the Spirit, it becomes a universal distribution in a way that's not limited previously.
So good. Yeah, thank you. Yeah.
So Jesus was crucified on a Friday and then was in the tomb on a Saturday, the Sabbath, and then rose to new life, the first day inaugurating a new creation of peace.
There we go, one more.
I was just thinking about baptism and how because Jesus died and was risen, we also get to participate in that death and new life, that new resurrection, which gives us peace and harmony today.
Thank you all. Now, pay attention because you'll get a chance to do something similar with our next chapter of the story. I want you to imagine with me a room, maybe like the one that might be behind this door. This room seems to have lived a lot of life over the past few days. Earlier this week, this place hosted a sacred feast shared among friends turned family. The next day, though, it became a place of hiding. Something truly terrible had happened, and those who had shared in warm hospitality the night before now huddled in stunned silence. Could he really be dead? The crew that had just entered town in a parade 5 days ago now feared for their lives, trying to make sense of the chaos and violence that had taken the life of their shepherd, teacher, and friend. That was Friday. Now, Saturday, that was eerie silence. A day meant for rest and worship turned to the emptiness of grief. The friends scattered to their own hiding spots, leaving this room quiet and dark. But then, early on the morning of the first day of the week, news began to stir of the unthinkable. Could it be true? Did she really see him alive? They each made their way back into this upper room as chaos stirred into anticipation. As most of the disciples gathered in, they locked this door behind them for fear that they might hear a knock on the door and the words, "This is the police. You're under arrest." But there was no knock. Instead, as the sun set and they tried their best to come around the table again for another meal, a familiar voice rang out, a gentle but victorious, "Peace be with you." Chaos transformed into shalom. So many questions still hung in the balance, but that didn't matter in this moment. The rabbi they had seen dead now stood before them alive. Again, he said, "Peace be with you. As the Father has sent me, I am sending you." He looked his disciples in their stunned but believing eyes and breathed into their lives the Holy Spirit, commissioning them to become agents of peace. A few weeks later, after this risen king returned to his throne, more followers gathered in what might have been the very same room. And again, God's breath fell on them. This time, it flickered like flames. It filled them with His Spirit and sparked a wildfire of the shalom of God. Order, harmony, flourishing, and wholeness spread through the words and deeds of people just like you and me, from all different walks of life, cultures, languages, and social statuses. Agents of peace in a world of chaos who are witnesses to the unbelievable. The long foretold peaceable kingdom is coming true. So now you get to join me again. This time I want to invite you to break into groups of 3 to 4 and to think back over the story of this peacemaking movement we call the church. How has the Spirit used us as God's people to restore order, harmony, flourishing, and wholeness in His world? After a couple of minutes of reflection in small groups, I'll ask a few of you to share. And so, yeah, go for it. All right. Finish up that thought. I'd love to pass the mic around and hear from a few of y'all, whether it's something you verbalized already or you're still holding on to. A story from the history of the church, maybe long ago or yesterday, of how the Spirit has used us as God's people to restore order, harmony, flourishing, and wholeness in His world. Who's got something? Throw that hand up. Oh, thank you.
singing of like business and the economy and how the people of God through the Spirit like reordering money and power and bringing that to like where the actual needs are.
That's good. Who else? A story of how God's people have enacted peace in his creation, powered by the Spirit.
I was thinking of the civil rights, a whole systemic change to help an entire people group to be reoriented in a way that should have been the entire time.
Yeah.
I was just thinking about the edification and the correction of the Spirit, and just no matter how far we get distracted or removed, that the process to be restored is the same. Like edification is where we are drifting, and then correction is putting us back on the road. Yeah. I just think the practicality of the Spirit for this one.
Good, restoring. Yeah, that's awesome.
I was thinking over the history of just even Missio. So 18 years that Missio has been around as MCs, and this week I was looking back over the hundreds of MCs that have been started in those 18 years throughout the network as it like grew, and thinking about how each and every one of those chose a little pocket or a people that they said, hey, something's unraveled here. How do we want to invest our lives for a season to see shalom happen? And just thinking even from in this room, right, I help. Like, how do we care and love for the marginalized, or downtown Mesa, or within teenagers who feel very distant? How do we give them connectivity, or this neighborhood? How do like that is the work of seeing that take place. That was, it was a cool little image to see that.
Yeah, I love that. All right, one more.
I was thinking of how God has restored communities, and like in the Peace Child, where they were headhunters, or actually a woman that we met who was a granddaughter of a community that was headhunters in India, and their lives transformed and restored by learning of Jesus.
Thank you. Yeah, there are hundreds of stories, even just in this room, of God weaving his peace back into his creation, restoring it to the way it should be, using his people as agents of peace in a world of chaos. Now, although this story, this grand story that we've told today, is absolutely true, it's also true that we live in a world today where this shalom can be hard to find, where violence, division, and death still seem to have the final word all too often. But as the people of God, agents of peace in a world of chaos, we know who will actually have the final say. We stand now between the two Advents, looking forward with anticipation of what will be, one day, fully true. The peaceable kingdom where the wolf will live with the lamb, the leopard will lie down with the goat, the calf and the lion and the yearling together, and a little child will lead them. The same disciple who recounted the story of the upper room for us, John, later received a vision from God of what the end of the story would be like. He wrote this: "There before me was a great multitude that no one could count, from every tribe, nation, people, and language, standing before the throne and before the Lamb. They were wearing white robes and were holding palm branches in their hand, and they cried out in a loud voice, 'Salvation belongs to our God who sits on the throne and to the Lamb.'" I can only imagine that harmony. And again later he says, "I heard a loud voice from the throne saying, 'Look, God's dwelling place is now among the people, and he will dwell with them. They will be his people, and God himself will be with them and be their God. He will wipe away every tear from their eyes. There will be no more death or mourning or crying or pain, for the old order of things has passed away." Friends, that's the reality that we are marching toward as agents of peace in a world of chaos. In the end, fully and finally, God will bring peace out of chaos. Would you pray with me?